I've always been critical of Black History Month because I think it's disingenuous to trot out Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King once a year in feel-good spotlights to assuage white guilt. The truth is, we're all taught the history laid down for us by rich white men to serve their ends and suppress argument. If you care about history, you should investigate the multiplicity of experience and perspective that informs that history. That said, as I've gotten older, I've also come to realize how difficult it is to establish a reserved platform for minority and otherwise disempowered voices. If a beachhead exists to demonstrate alternative histories, there's an element of moral imperative to storm it with some kind of truth. And so, this lily white boy is launching a long gestating side podcast about alternative superhero comics during Black History Month by critically assessing a controversial short-lived initiative of stealth-styled black nationalists. Hey, no one guaranteed there wouldn't be a minefield buried under the sand of that supposed beachhead. Before we get started, though, you may be groaning to yourself, why would Rolled Spine start another freaking podcast? Technically, this is actually a parallel project for our pre-existing, if highly sporadic, Amazing Heroes interviews of comic book creators I do at conventions. Amazing Heroes was my favorite magazine covering superheroes before it bit the dust Wizard kicked up as it launched the speculator boom that ultimately demolished the industry. I cribbed the logo of Amazing Heroes' short-lived, small-focus revival, but as a magazine it offered more than just interviews. They did stuff like up-to-date hero histories before there were comprehensive reference books or Wikipedia articles for comic book material, and they routinely shone a light on smaller press creations instead of just trading heavy coverage for ad buys like most of their successors. Rolled Spine has an occasional show called The Underguys that was intended to cover, among other things, non-mainstream superheroes. But the truth is, we get so few episodes of that show out that when we do, I don't want to waste them on more steroid freaks and capes. I'd rather cover truly independent comics touching on themes that are less commercial and more emotionally or artistically ambitious. At the very least, stuff somewhat outside of the amorphous quasi-genre of superheroes. Also, I like doing extra nerdy solo deep dives into the Biff Powell crowd, and I'd prefer to do it without giving free promotional resources to the increasingly few faceless corporations that own everything. You can only produce so many unpaid hours of media devoted to Disney or AT&T owned IP before a shower isn't enough to make you feel entirely clean. At some point, I had to acknowledge that I'm part of the problem of ensuring our shared modern popular culture remains trademarked and copyrighted by immoral billionaires. Finally, between you and me, there are just so many plain vanilla DC Marvel fanboy podcasts out these days that I couldn't maintain consciousness while editing my own anymore.
Do you remember reading comic books when you were a kid? Well, today there is a whole new generation discovering those superheroes drawn in ink, and what they're discovering is comic books filled with characters of a different color.
Comics have always been a dominant force in my life, so technically I'm about to enter my 6th decade as a fan, going back to the 1970s. I've got a pretty good bead on the history of mainstream, mass-distributed North American comics. As both a hardcore fan and former retailer, I've had plenty of experience with smaller press comics as well. As enormous a resource as sites like Grand Comics Database, Comic Book DB, Comic Vine, and Mike's Amazing World of Comics are, I still routinely find gaps in what they've cataloged and what I'm aware actually exists through first-hand experience. That said, the past few weeks have been an education, because there's a whole subcategory of Afrocentric comic books produced almost exclusively for black booksellers, cultural fairs, and regional initiatives that I remain woefully ignorant of. It doesn't trouble me when it comes to artsy, indie, navel-gazing, semi-biographical stuff, because there will never be a complete accounting of all the micropress, mimeographed, fanzine mini-comics with print runs in the dozen. What bothers me is there's whole universes of African-American superheroes that I have never, and likely will never, have a handle on. I like to think I'm hipper than the average cracker by picking up odd issues of Brother Man, Dictator of Discipline, or Chocolate Thunder, but I'm suddenly asking myself questions like, wait, who's the Black Savior?
He's called Original Man, and he's definitely original. He's a black comic book superhero. Teamed up with Mighty Ace, Darkforce, and Lone Wolf, they're out to rid the world of gangs, drugs, even AIDS.
We wanted to do something that showed our culture and then showed a certain amount of awareness, get some knowledge, and cover subjects that the mainstream comic books don't want to touch.
Anything that shows a truer sense of reality, people want it.
For Alonzo Washington and Tony Jappa, reality means creating characters that represent life as they know it as black men. They've developed a series of comic books aimed at black teenagers, raising their social consciousness and dealing with black-on-black violence.
The average young African-American male has had a police officer step on his neck for no reason, throw him against a car. We want to address that.
What comic characters did you grow up with?
Superman, Batman, the Incredible Hulk, but the problem with that is seeing all those super characters kind of made me lose my own identity.
Step aside, Superman. Here come the Ebony Warriors. Zwanna, Purge, and Heru are some of the newest heroes to hit the comic book stands. These are superheroes with a social message. You'll find them fighting drug abuse, gang warfare, and racism in the inner city. Nabile Hage is one of 5 black writers who publish ANIA comics. He wants to create positive role models for African Americans.
As a kid, it was kind of hard for me to fantasize about being a white man in tights, flying around, saving the world.
So Hage created Zwanna, son of Zulu, an African prince who battles racial injustice. His fellow writer, Roosevelt Pitt, came up with the idea for a non-violent hero called Purge.
You can't tell me that a black superhero cannot have a college education, build his own business, become a multi-millionaire. That's what Purge is all about.
One instance of that sphere crossing over into the comic publishing mainstream that I had a vague awareness of, but no first-hand experience with until recently, was ANIA. According to Wikipedia, the Association of Black Comic Book Publishers was an imprint formed by independent publishers Acme Comics, African Prince Productions, Africa Rising, Afrocentric Comic Books, Dark Zulu Lies Comics Incorporated, Inner City Products Hype Comics, Omega 7 Comics, and Up Comics that published African-American superhero comics. Syntax Wikipedia's. My own research disputes this assertion. Hype Comics is best known for producing 2 issues of Inner City Products between 1991 and 93, with no color superhero material that I could find. 1992's African Prince Productions came out with Captain Africa number 1 through 3 and an ashcan written and illustrated by Storm, aka Dwayne J. Ferguson. Per a brief synopsis, Captain Africa, Naji Mwitu, investigates whether Johan Sutherland is behind the recent brutal murders of 2 businessmen. In synopsis, Ferguson had previously produced Hamster Vice, a rare success for Blackthorn Publishing during the mid-'80s black and white glut, and has since done the young reader's book series Kid Caramel Private Investigator. But I can find no reference to Captain Africa and anything related to ANIA.
Meteor Man's in town.
He's come to save the world, one neighborhood at a time. Meteor Man.
Sorry, Mike.
Robert Townsend, Marla Gibbs, Eddie Griffin, Robert Guillaume, James Earl Jones, Bill Cosby, and another bad creation. Special appearances by Luther Vandross, Sinbad, Naughty by Nature, Cypress Hill, and Big Daddy Kane.
Stay chilly. Peace them out. Chilly.
Robert Townsend is...
Have a good night, folks.
Meteor Man, directed by Robert Townsend.
The Association of Black Comic Book Publishers was the brainchild of Eric Griffin, who unfortunately shares a name with a bunch of more famous people, so tracking down information on him and ANIA has been elusive. My best guess is that Griffin had some sort of inroad to writer, director, actor Robert Townsend, or some other party associated with the MGM black superhero movie The Meteor Man. Somebody came into some money. Because Griffin banded several of these previously completely unknown black publishers together, resources were pooled or shared, and a launch of comics was formulated to get their books out in full color on quality paper in the big distributor catalogs for $1.95 each. Admittedly, the standard cover price for major publishers' comics at the time was $1.25, but many majors like Valiant and Darkforce ran $2.25 to $2.50. ANIA was managing Image Comics comparable pricing with bonus trading cards and advertisements for Sega Sports video games, the CD-ROM game Flashback, the United Negro College Fund, Wizard-branded bags and boards, and the first Savage Dragon trade paperback, most of which were also advertising at DC and Marvel. That latter ad is also significant, because Griffin had secured a promotional image for ANIA from superstar image artist Eric Larson, with isolated and recolored sections of the piece serving as the basis for the book's trading cards. These books looked 100% legit next to anything else on the stands. The stands, though, were a big problem. The newborn Milestone Media had cut a deal for production and distribution with DC Comics, and even at a time when new comic book universes were like a license to print money, Milestone noted enormous resistance to their clearly multicultural line. The book still sold, at least the debut issues polybagged with bells and whistles, but the struggle was real from issue number 2 on to overcome fans and retailers who at best lacked confidence in a black-run publishing initiative. Titles like Spawn, Shadowhawk, and Tribe may have moved 7-figure units, but they did so in part by tricking people into buying books with discreetly positioned black leads. Hell, Shadowhawk waited until its second miniseries to clue people in. Given that Milestone had Time Warner and a media blitz on its side, is it any wonder ANIA stumbled right out of the gate? Milestone had veteran talent and a steady revenue stream behind it, while ANIA were rookie nobodies with survive or die stakes for their one shot at the brass ring. They came out swinging at Milestone, not just as their chief competitor for an African-American reading audience, with a much more white audience-friendly approach, but also because their dissent got them lines in seemingly every article written about Milestone. ANIA's critical voice gave them no-cost piggyback promotion, but it also created a dorky version of beef that pushed fans to choose a side. What happens when at least a portion of the people speaking for ANIA position the company as by blacks for blacks, a thin minority of readers to begin with, and then further slices that niche with a them versus us stance on the more inclusive and well-heeled Milestone?
From Los Angeles, I'm Amy Powell for E! News Daily. Black readers make up a substantial portion of the $700 million a year comic industry, so it's no surprise competition for their attention is heating up.
I'm Alonzo Washington, the creator of Omega 7. We are located in Kansas City, Kansas. We have 7 employees, and we have been in business for 24 years. Our target audience is young people, ethnic populations, sci-fi nerds, superhero fans, and people who would not buy traditional comic books. I'm super qualified to run a business. I've been a businessman since I was 7 years old. I would make comic books and sell them to my classmates in school for 25 cents a piece. My business makes a huge impact as it relates to fighting crime, finding missing kids, and preventing violence in the community. Omega 7 sets out to protect children, solve more crimes, and to reduce violence every year.
Can y'all think of any fictional black hero?
Washington and his crusaders are fast becoming a conquering tool even in the classroom. They're being used to teach reading and self-esteem. Experts say these positive black images are long overdue.
They're seriously looking for someone to identify with. The creation of positive images strikes at the heart of the matter.
Alonzo and Tony are becoming superheroes themselves. They've sold thousands of books at home in Kansas City. They're charging into other markets now. Darkforce hits bookstores soon. He's fighting AIDS and packs a free condom.
Through a comic book medium, it is a way to expand their mind and make them feel good about themselves. And hopefully what they learn from the comic book, they can incorporate in their lifestyle.
Lifestyles these superheroes are crusading to change. Vicki Mabry, CBS News, Kansas City.
Another of the major obstacles for ANIA was infighting, as readily evidenced by one of their initial collaborators, Omega 7 Incorporated. Publisher and soul writer Alonzo Washington was born in 1967, and beginning in high school operated as a community activist, often trying to bridge strife amongst local gangs in Kansas City. From an early age, Washington loved superheroes, but was dismayed not only by the lack of black representation, but by his belief that mainstream African-American superheroes looked and acted like white dudes who were just colored darker skinned. While still in elementary school, he began creating his own characters and selling DIY comics for a quarter.
I was always making my comic books and my own action figures.
Washington eventually pursued established comic book publishers, but not finding them receptive to his ideas, he worked towards self-publishing.
I used No Way as Way and went to a library and read a book on publishing. I found out that publishing meant having the money to produce and print your own materials. I always wanted to be a superhero and comic book creator. My teachers told me I couldn't do both. As I approached various comic book companies, they told me no one wanted to see a black superhero. I used my media contacts that I gained as an activist to hype my comic book. I took pre-orders for the comic book and used the money that I gained to publish my first comic book.
Raising $5,000 in startup capital from speaking engagements and pre-sales, Washington published the first 3,000-copy run of the black and white Original Man #1. He sold out at a cultural expo and attracted the attention of a Newsweek magazine correspondent. A subsequent article generated more sales and more media attention, including a segment on the CBS Evening News with Connie Chung featuring Original Man creators Washington and Jappa, which I caught and recorded on VHS back in the day.
Superheroes always save the day, usually by fighting unlikely supervillains that look like penguins or who make magical maniacal machines that threaten doom. But as Vicki Mabry reports, there's a whole new look to superheroes, and the crimes they fight are much more realistic.
As of 1998, Omega 7 Incorporated was reported to have produced 40 issues of 4 different titles, with sales of over 600,000 copies, among them Original Man, Woman, and Boy, The Mighty Ace, Lady Ace, Dark Force, Dark Queen, Lone Wolf Assassin, and an Omega 7 team book.
I also produced action figures based off of my comic book characters and sold them in department stores, comic book shops, and Toys R Us and Walmart, and cultural stores all across the country.
In 1998, another hero, the Omega Man, managed to generate a line of action figures. He had a Prince Akeem rat tail rooted to the back of his head, and I want one of my own now. The toy, not the hairstyle. You can pick up an Omega Man on eBay for about $10. Yet I've never seen one in a comic shop, so that's probably the only place you'll find one. There are multiple repaints of the base figure, including a cape variant, plus sculpt variants to produce action figures for Mighty Ace and Dark Wolf, both of which appear to be very scarce. Omega 7 characters also appear on t-shirts, watches, baseball caps, and posters.
For 25 years, Omega 7 has published African-American comic books designed to promote socially conscious messages to youth. We have an edge in obtaining media attention. Another edge is using our comic book to promote safety and fight crime in the community.
According to the 2001 book Against All Odds, 10 entrepreneurs who followed their hearts and found success by Wendy Beach, Washington earned nearly $1 million in revenue in less than a decade of Omega 7's existence. The operation was mostly run by Washington, his mother, and wife Dana, who used to dress up as Original Woman for shows.
Let's do something different. I'm a businessman with an edge because publishing comic books and fighting crime is my pledge. When it comes to black comics, it's like zero. That's why I decided to create a black superhero. To impress you with a rap and dance is my plan so I can get 50 grand in my hand. Being positive is our pledge. That's why Omega 7 has the edge. Rah!
With all credit to Washington's media savvy, longevity, and hustle, the books themselves had some serious problems. Despite the numbers quoted to the Washington Post, Omega 7 was such a micropress that less than a dozen individual comics are cataloged by sites like GCD, and fewer still can be purchased by national backstock outfits like Mile High Comics and MyComicShop.com. I personally have 3 of their comics: the full-color Original Man number 0, the Saga of Original Man number 1, and the Mighty Ace number 1. All of them are comparable to mid-80s black and white bust books, especially Original Man, which appears to my eye to have been drawn entirely with a ballpoint pen. Worse is the coloring, which looks mostly like reproduction of felt-tip markers, but sometimes map colors and even crayons. The writing is similar to lower-tier Bronze Age material from outfits like Atlas and Charlton, including the Cliff Notes narrative, excessive violence, and a general cheapjack exploitation vibe. The lettering is severely amateurish, with no one proofreading for spelling, grammar, and other constant scripting and typographical errors. With negatives out of the way, the premise is a solid, what if Wakanda eventually conquered the Earth for its own good, and we pick up with Black Panther $29.99 in a utopian Legion of Superheroes far future. Original Man has an appealing red costume with green and gold highlights. More distinctive, especially for the time, was Michael's tight beard. His power set was a more sci-fi Superman, derived from a high-tech skin-tight legacy uniform. In one story, his retiring hero father is killed by McTiernan predators, and in another, Original Man is active, if partially powered, in the present day, fighting against the cop-killing vigilante Darkforce.
My Comics for Cops program. This program gives away free comic books, action figures, trading cards, and posters to police departments across the country to give away in urban communities to build trust with young people in the communities in which they serve.
The Mighty Ace number 1 is a better read thanks to a more complete origin story with vastly superior art and computer coloring. It looks so much better than Original Man that it's hard to believe it came out the same year and from the same company. Paul Mortalli's artwork wasn't quite ready for the majors, but all the fundamentals were there, and I wish I could have seen how he developed. Realistic but dynamic anatomy, solid panel-to-panel storytelling, fairly good backgrounds, and an overall cinematic style without stiff photo referencing. I also really liked stylistic flourishes recalling Bart Sears, Tom Rainey, and Larry Stroman without appearing to steal from any of them. Wealthy nuclear engineer and inventor Eric Drake is basically Tony Stark, but with Michael Steele's politics. Similar to the Icon rocket dynamic at Milestone, he gains a sidekick from the hood named Popsicle to contrast against his conservatism as they both seek his brother's killers. Perhaps a little too similar because Icon was the primary target of ANIA's attacks on Milestone.
Calling on Robert Downey Jr., a.k.a. Iron Man, Christian Bale, a.k.a. Batman, and Steve Amell, a.k.a. Arrow, to come to Kansas City to help me raise money to fight real-life crime. My name is Alonzo Washington, a.k.a. the Casey Crime Fighter. I'm a comic book creator, a dad, a married man, and I live in a city that has a violent shooting or murder every other weekend.
Breaking news, one person dead after a shooting in Kansas City, Kansas.
I blog for tips. I take out newspaper ads and I use radio PSAs to get tips in unsolved crimes.
How about that?
The 3 Omega 7 stories I read were all amusing, so long as you stay away from the editorial material and press releases. I had to brave them for this, and they're swollen with unsubstantiated, poorly drafted hype and the tedious self-aggrandizement of Alonzo Washington. This is a guy who got the Kansas City Police Department to pass out trading cards to school children, then turned around and gave a title to an anti-hero who slayed cops by the half dozen with abandon. He touts his role in organizations he himself created while declaring himself the Malcolm X of comics. One issue features a crude drawing of ANIA founder Eric Griffin under the heading Sellout. In the drawing, former artist on Original Man Anthony Jappa is depicted on his knees preparing to kiss Griffin's butt, which he also declares in a speech balloon if his positioning and protruding lips didn't make that clear. Washington slams Griffin's use of trading cards drawn by Eric Larson to help promote the ANIA launches via a white artist, but proceeds to polybag an issue of Original Man with said, badly recolored trading card, even after he was kicked out of ANIA. Worth noting, Original Man number 0 cost $3.50, contained only house ads, and one wonders if the terrible coloring was a last-minute save after losing ANIA resources.
In 2014, Omega 7 also helped prosecutors and police solve a large amount of murders.
Investigators hope an anti-crime activist can give them some insight into a murder case in the metro.
When one child was shot and paralyzed at a convenience store and another one was murdered at a different convenience store, Omega 7 created a social media and radio campaign designed to get tips in those cases and also to reduce murders throughout the community. Omega 7 was also able to rally local businesses to add $10,000 to the rewards in both of those cases and was able to solve them both. I created missing kids trading cards. I even featured missing kids and murdered children in my comic books and in newspaper ads. Those ads solved the Precious Doe case. This was a child that was beheaded. I was able to get a tip that arrested her killers, turning me into a real-life superhero.
In a May 8, 1998 piece for the Orlando Sentinel by Rebecca Thomas, Washington went after Spawn as a negative representation. He's a burnout dead guy with power from the devil. He lambasted Milestone Media for taking talent and opportunity away from true African-American publishers like himself, calling most mainstream black creators stupid, arrogant, and pursuing money at any cost. In a November 14, 1993 article for the LA Times by Irene Lacker, Washington said, "I don't think there's a message in Milestone Comics at all. It's really a chocolate-dipped Superman. Any image of an African-American beyond a person going to jail or playing basketball is positive. But with Independence, we're trying to do more than produce a black superhero. We're trying to correct stereotypes passed down on African-Americans for years and years. It becomes more than a money thing."
I think Caucasians are greater than we are because we don't get a proper balance. That has an effect on a young person's mind.
Apparently, Washington had issues with Griffin pursuing an ANIA trading card deal with white-owned Comic Images, and felt Griffin had gone soft on a proposed boycott of Milestone due to that relationship. Meanwhile, Original Man artist Anthony Jappa was also accused of trying to pursue a trading card deal without Washington's consent and got fired, which may be where Omega Man came from, for all I know. Despite the different name and costume, the packaging for the Omega Man toy featured art of Original Man, and a lot of elements were shared by both characters, like a rat tail, kind of a tell. In a different LA Times story from April 10th, 1998 by Dana Fields promoting the action figures, it states, "A lot of these black superheroes that are sidekicks are ex-cons, ex-athletes, something stereotypical. Omega Man comes from the future. He's intelligent. He carves out his own destiny. He travels through time, so that means he knows a lot about history. Omega Man does have a recurring enemy, the evil Cull. They are shape-shifting characters drowsily bent on preventing creation of the peaceful, racism-free future paradise in which our hero dwells. In one issue, the Culls seek to create racial havoc by attempting to kill O.J. Simpson. Revealing Judge Lance Ito as a shape-shifting Cull, Omega Man dispenses with the alien and sets history back on course. In another, Omega Man is zooming into the middle of the Million Man March, just in time to stop white supremacists from assassinating Minister Louis Farrakhan. And through it all, he makes points about tough social issues. AIDS, black-on-black crime, disrespect of women. To me, that sounds like Washington tried to fire the co-creator of Original Man and ended up duplicating him as Omega Man. But I haven't read any of those. What I can say is Washington very publicly spills all the tea, casting everyone in the very worst light, and it reflects badly back at him.
4 independent black publishers have formed ANIA. Their comic book themes range from socially conscious superheroes to ancient African adventures. They say other comics feature white characters painted black, but their books come from an Afrocentric perspective.
So I'm here to set the record straight from what I have seen, and I'm going to put it in my comic book from the heart, and that's what makes ANIA books as a whole unique.
We're trying to give the black youth self-esteem. Give them something that they can look to and say, yes, I can do that too.
Imagine being a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy in tights running around saving the world.
So faster than a Zulu warrior, artist Nabile, Hage, and Eric Griffin created their own African-American comic books as part of the burgeoning black publishing group ANIA. That's the Swahili word for protect and defend.
Typically, black heroes have not been put in a positive light. They're typically ex-cons or ex-crooks or sidekicks or that. ANIA is here to put black heroes in the forefront by promoting positive black heroes.
ANIA's socially conscious and cutting-edge comics are finding an audience. Hage and Griffin say the company has become the 16th largest publisher of comic books in the world.
We have kicked down the doors to show, look, we are African-American publishers and we got the talent. When we have an opportunity, we will excel and beat anything out there on the market.
Eric Griffin himself was no innocent, slamming Milestone Media in a November 1994 cover story for Black Enterprise as not black enough. And according to Black Superheroes, Milestone Comics and their fans by Jeffrey A. Brown accused them of Uncle Tomism to any media outlet running a story on Milestone. Africa Rising published the series Ebony Warrior, whose debut issue featured an editorial by owner Eric Griffin.
You don't take much. You don't take much to be a hero.
Afrocentric and proud of it. It is a statement that is the guiding philosophy that provides the foundation for the ANIA line of books. It is not meant to alienate or to drive away white readers. Pro-black does not mean anti-white. So what does Afrocentric mean? It is a perspective, a view of the world from the eyes of African Americans. ANIA books have this one key ingredient that separates our books from other publishers. It is the same ingredient African Americans have added to every artistic medium they have entered. The challenge for ANIA is to give the reader this experience within the story, art, characters, and creators. With independent black publishers guiding the creation of our books, ANIA comics are guaranteed to have this experience. This also means we do not discriminate against white writers and artists. It is a matter of ownership, not control. Without ownership, you have no control. We have had many promotional wins, netting coverage from newspapers across the country. You've probably already seen stories on CNN, in USA Today, New York Newsday, CBS News, and more. We hope to bring new customers to comic book stores across the country that may never thought of buying comic books. Why is the media interested in ANIA? Never before have independent African-American publishers united to produce positive black heroes on a national scale. Positive heroes doesn't mean simply characters that are perfect and goody two-shoes. It means showing African-Americans in many roles. Stereotypes are not the norm in ANIA books. Because we are comic book publishers, we are also dedicated to producing high-quality, collectible comics. This is why ANIA books use state-of-the-art color separations with plenty of airbrushing and the best quality paper. We are not here to shaft the retailer or the collector. We know higher quality books last longer and retain their value longer. At ANIA, we spare no expense. Zwanna, son of Zulu, Heru, son of Ausar, Purge, and Ebony Warrior are our titles. Check us out. And remember, just because it's black doesn't mean it's ANIA. The ANIA Gang. Eric Griffin, President. Ebony Warrior was written by Eric Griffin and drawn by Stephen X. Ruthier. From the trading card text, Kamal Jackson, frustrated with the crime, drugs, and violence running rampant in his Yorktown community, becomes Ebony Warrior. It's pretty cool that Ebony Warrior hails from a real-world southern city instead of the usual New York-type suspects. Jackson is highly educated, affluent, and much wanted by the material world he rejects in favor of rebuilding his hood through philanthropic efforts. Motivated by a tragic, violent death in his family, this skilled martial artist with a high-tech suit of armor and melee weapons confronts the inner city in the time of the crack epidemic and a predicted, but ultimately never to come, tsunami of crime, which was due mid-decade. According to Freakonomics, that was preemptively aborted by Roe v. Wade. The hero catches the attention of a beautiful black lady reporter who interviews him and tours his communal facility. He also forms an alliance with another fit black male Commissioner Gordon type who is addressing the rampant crime through more conventional means. At the root of the problem is a rich white power broker protected by a complicit media and connections made through politics in the underworld, who is served by a cunning and well-dressed black field commander. The main action beat of the first issue involves saving an innocent from a gang in an alley. Most of the two issues produced are resolutely street level, but the second issue teases more fantastical foes, including a sword-wielding, armored black warrior woman and a feral hired assassin out for blood. Ebony Warrior, who I'm beginning to regret never picked up a short nickname, primarily relies on the enhanced senses in his super helmet, which gets a sweet L.A.R. Brown-style schematic, as well as hand-to-hand combat and found weapons. His green and red costume is extremely distinctive, especially for an urban vigilante, and he looks so freaking cool I wish I had an action figure to go with a Mega Man. It's especially wicked on the flashy covers by Ruthier and Machindo Eye. And while the interiors do not hold up to their promise, it's still decent work worthy of the big two at the time. I'd take it over a lot of what guys like Valiant were offering for sure. There isn't much of note going on with the plot that you haven't read in 100 other comics, but I still wanted to read the fight promised in the unreleased number 3. Well, unreleased to my knowledge. I found a cover for a seeming relaunch called Eric Griffin's Ebony Warrior, but no further information tied to the single copy for sale on Amazon for $10.
Who will tell the stories of our heritage? Today on Positively Black, we have the storytellers and a person who distributes books written by black authors. Good morning, I'm Julian Phillips. Our topic today is Inside Story, a black perspective. Joining us in our first segment, Nabile Hage, author and president of Dark Zulu Lies, a cartoon series targeted to African-American teens. Tell us about these. I'm part of a national network of publishers across the nation known as ANIA. we're the National Association of Independent Black Comic Book Publishers. We banded together to create strong black superheroes for our youth, to put them in the forefront. Typically, when I was growing up in the 70s, I would read a comic book and I would see, I am always going to be relegated to the role of a sidekick in this society because I don't have role models. Well, ANIA, we have come out here to reverse that image, that stereotype. We have created strong male black superheroes and put them in their own comic book in the forefront so that a black kid can pick it up and say, hey, this guy is cool. And not only he's cool, he's smart. Every single one of our characters, to include Zwanna, son of Zulu, Heru, son of Ausar, Purge, and Ebony warrior. These are all 4 separate heroes. They're all college educated. They did not learn the errors of their ways from the streets, as the mainstream comics would have you believe all the time. They come out to help the community. They clean up the neighborhood. They beat up the crackheads, the skinheads. They try to promote positive Afrocentric values. Well, let's talk about some of these characters here, like Heru. Doesn't it have a historical perspective of some sort? Tell us about him. Most definitely. Heru is in a class all by itself. That particular book, Roger Barnes is the author. He's locally in New York with Afrocentric Comic Book. He is bringing to the foreground the Afrocentric aspect to African history as opposed to the Eurocentric aspect of African history. Take, for example, the name Heru. Yes. That is the original African name for that Greek god. Horus is the Greek interpretation of Heru that is taught in the schools today. See, we don't even know our own history. Well, Roger Barnes is basing his comic book off of books like Stolen Legacy, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, actual books that you cannot find anywhere else except in the African-American bookstores.
Afrocentric Comic Books produced at least 4 issues of Heru, son of Ausar, by Roger Barnes. Each has a painted cover, but I prefer the interiors, which has something of a 70s Art Nouveau look that reminds me of PSA posters I saw growing up. Barnes looked at a lot of bodybuilder reference for his detailed beefcake drawings, and you can definitely see some Billy Graham influence in his layouts. Barnes' graduate degree in African history is shown off in fascinating editorial material on the inside covers that, unfortunately for me at least, overshadowed the more rote mythological origin of the titular hero. Unlike in Omega 7, the ANIA characters don't seem to relate to one another, and this is especially true of Heru, philosophizing in millennia past. Perhaps as a mea culpa, there's one stretch of dialogue where Heru name drops Dark Zulu, Ebony Warrior, Purge, and Original Man, though none in character context, and his companion even references ANIA and Milestone. Roger Barnes produced a one-shot called Trans-Nubians #1 in 1996, and some sort of Heru continuation called Extraordinary Grands in 2002, the latter appearing to have been computer-rendered. There's also a digital author named Roger Barnes, but I don't know if they're related.
They work with a team of artists who bring their ideas to life on the page. For John Ruiz, it took a bit of time to draw the character Zwanna just right.
Nabile said make him move like a black man in the comic book and not be so stiff, and I guess he thinks white people are stiff. But so I had to really loosen things up and make them jive.
Oh, nice meeting you again.
So far, they've sold over 1 million issues since their books went on sale across the country last February. These black superheroes face tough competition in the $700 million a year comic book industry, but they are winning over their own fans.
When I found out it was a gentleman like me in it, that really got me interested into it.
It opens up people's eyes to the fact that there's more than just, say, one type of black person.
Nabile also opened some eyes last year when he climbed the Georgia State Capitol building dressed as Zulu to promote his comics.
I knew I had to do something to break this mindset of the people that you only have to buy white superheroes. So in a fit of rage, I threw on my Zulu warrior costume and I climbed the outside of the Georgia State Capitol, and that got the message. That drove the message home.
Now, when Nabile came in off that ledge in Georgia, he was held by police for a few hours, but no charges were filed. He hopes the stunt brought some attention to his comic books because his goal is to sell 3 million this year.
Again, from the LA Times in 1993, a group of 3 black independents, ANIA, has tried to stress a united front among publishers since its recent parting with flamboyant Atlanta member Nabile Hage. To a large degree, Nabile Hage was the media voice for ANIA. Dark Zulu Lies offered a 2-page spread of color Hage photographs, usually in costume as Zwanna, meeting Todd McFarlane's Spawn model, Rob Liefeld's Chapel model, a Toxic Avenger model, and the actual Mr. T and famed painter Joe Jusko. Hage talked a good game for the camera, but his first, and to my knowledge, only issue of Zwanna, Son of Zulu, was the most notorious and damaging of the ANIA titles. With the noticeably not black artist John Ruiz and inker Eric Myers, Hage introduced, and I quote, a descendant of great King Shaka Zulu, his veins flowing with venom of a radioactive DDT-crazed cobra, exiled across the vast sea to a smelly concrete jungle, vowing revenge. Zwanna is the prince of an African nation sent to Black American State University, or BASU, for an education in the U.S. He attracts the carnal attention of a young woman to whom he declares from off-panel in the boudoir, "I got that jungle love for you, baby." Then there's the carnal attention of an aged, balding, transvestite, homosexual, serial rapist, talent agent with a Victorian handlebar mustache, wearing a monocle and a pink tutu with fishnets. As it turns out, a trio of billionaire gay transvestite molesters dubbed the Three Widows are known to be plotting the hostile takeover of Zwanna's African nation, which is part of the reason he's come to America. However, he's knocked out and captured by them in his civilian form purely by coincidence because his ass was just too irresistible. Prince Zwanna is bound in only his underwear from chains while dangling from the ceiling of an abandoned prison with additional chains spreading his legs apart while he's pawed and threatened with sodomy for 3 pages before letting cry the magic word Zob that transforms him into a still near-naked tribesman. Zwanna then brutally executes the 4 Three Black Widows, decapitating one with his still-locked arm chains, crushing another with a wedge of concrete from the jail ceiling that was still connected to said chains, collapsing a third skull with said rebar-impregnated concrete wedge, before finally changing things up and chucking his contextually phallic spear through the final widow. It's as if Hage was the John Hammond of some sort of queer-baiting Jurassic Park where they couldn't extract the entire LGBTQ genetic code, so they had to derive flawed replacements from a frog, but still lost the L's and B's, so they fashioned G's to mutated variant T's, and so very many Q's. Now, I will point out that this is the second time Zwanna hulks out in the issue, and in the first he executes a group of skinheads with Hitler mustaches. One in particular has a Confederate flag wife beater on who gets a spear driven through his neck out the back of his head. That I get. That's exactly what people with a narrow, prejudiced view of black nationalism expected from an outfit like ANIA. And yet, why again are the skinheads also dressed like Right Said Fred in matching skin-tight black pants held up with suspenders on their often nude chests? I think it would be a mistake to take Zwanna, son of Zulu #1 at face value. It is either one of the most insanely clueless and prejudiced comic books ever, in an industry that gave us Ebony White and Chop Chop, or the admittedly deeply problematic shock elements are part of the gleeful anti-PC humor I recognized while I was reading it. The book is kind of funny. In an Andrew Dice, long duck dong, 2 snaps up in a Z formation, you shouldn't have even been trying to get away with this a quarter century ago kind of way. Like using the N-word, only a black creator should be allowed to tell stories about a barefoot super Zulu who swings through the city on fast-growing vines produced by a spear that he wielded like spiderwebbing. However, the queer quiche queens are not something that have ever existed outside of an ill-informed transphobic fever dream, and there's little more appalling than a member of an historically oppressed minority using an empowering platform to punch down at an even more universally abused minority. It's someone bringing up the protocols of the Elders of Zion as the most perniciously delusional Illuminati conspiracy theory, and Nabile Hage having you hold his beer. If you look at Eric Larson's promo image for ANIA, there's a central figure of a man, and there are only men pictured by the way, who is wearing plain clothes. I've seen video of Eric Griffin, Alonzo Washington, Nabile Hage, and Roosevelt Pitt Jr. It ain't them. So unless that's meant to represent Roger Barnes, there was a 6th publisher out at ANIA before they were even announced as in. Omega 7 is gone. An artist named Hobbs drew a second ANIA group image for one of their last issues released, but by that point DZL was going or gone. That leaves 3 houses still standing at the very end.
Shook from the chemistry, I don't have the knowledge itself, they just stole my identity, but I know I'm powerful, feel it in every follicle, I can crush diabolicals with these technologicals, I know who I am on the verge of the purifier, I know I am.
Purge. Who is Purge? Purge is co-created by Roosevelt Pitt and Zach Upright with UP Comics in North Carolina. Purge is a college-educated man, a millionaire, a black man that built himself from his bootstraps in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. That is where the story is based. Now, he is tired of seeing drugs and corruption in his city perpetrated against black people, whereas black people are not the ones that are bringing in the guns. We don't have any gun factories. We don't have any planes bringing cocaine or whatever in this city. What he does is he built an arsenal of high-tech weaponry and equipment to go out and
and rid the city of corruption and crime in his neighborhood.
So what we have basically here are a series of strong black characters that our teens and children can look up to.
One last look at the LA Times article. I want ANIA to have an outlook in the media as a positive company that's Afrocentric, says member Roosevelt Pitt Jr., the creator of Purge comic, based in Greensboro, North Carolina. We're not multicultural the way Milestone is. A lot of people have branded us racist, saying you don't have Asians or Latins. The reason we're Afrocentric and dealing only with Afrocentric concerns is we're African Americans. That's what we know. The back of the Purge trading card is a brick of single-space text, so I'll give you my own summary. Richard James Kincaid, frustrated with the crime, drugs, and violence running rampant in his Winston-Salem community, becomes Purge. It's pretty cool that Purge hails from a real southern city instead of the usual New York-type suspects. Kincaid is highly educated, affluent, and much wanted by the material world he rejects, in favor of rebuilding his hood through philanthropic efforts. Motivated by a tragic, violent death in his family, the skilled martial artist with a high-tech suit of armor and melee weapons confronts the inner city in the time of the crack epidemic. This sounds kind of familiar. He forms an alliance with another fit black male Commissioner Gordon type who is addressing the rampant crime through more conventional means, and at one point there's a tour of his industrial factory. The kingpin is a bit of a mystery, although a rich white power broker shows up at one point, but the primary antagonist is a cunning and well-dressed black field commander. The main action beat in the first issue involves saving an innocent from a gang in an alley. Most of the 2 issues produced are resolutely street level, but the second issue teases more fantastical foes, including a sword-wielding armored black warrior woman and a hired assassin out for blood. There's also a crazy genocidal ex-scientist named Pathos who gave himself immunity to all diseases by infecting himself with most of them, and now he wants to spread them. Got that going for it. I made the mistake of saving Ebony Warrior and Purge for last and alternating between reading the books, so that I was confusing myself as to what happened in which title. Did Purge meet the cop while saving him from the gang? No, that was the regular dude who was investigating the crime in his free time. Which one had the lady reporter again? Purge uses a pair of sais, a wrist-mounted grappling hook, and electrified batons that he ricochets off walls to hit his targets. Good thing Marvel was too busy suing Rob Liefeld over Agent America's shield to notice. While Purge's dark blue and white costume is nice, it's not as killer as Ebony Warrior's. Speaking of which, neither of the heroes are killers, though they'll bludgeon the hell out of hoods as they both work their way up the criminal hierarchy. Purge has a weird moral code he calls the Purification Agenda that's supposed to be like his take on Marianne Cobretti's Crime is a Disease and He's the Cure, but comes off more like the favorite Screwdriver dance remix of those neo-Nazi Zwanna slaughtered. Ebony Warrior has a backup strip about a genetically enhanced assassin named Turner, and Purge also had backups, but his were more satisfying. The Pathos origin story is dense with text and scientific jargon, but thanks to its short length, it's immersive rather than suffocating. A rooftop tour interview with Purge in the second issue is peak late Bronze Age Marvel character building through fourth wall breaking direct communication with the reader, and it totally works both on its own and as nostalgia bait. Purge also has an honest-to-gosh letter column with drawings and earnest little kid fans and one pedantic jerk that offers far too much acidic deconstructive criticism, and I am he as we, and we are all together. I am Frank's letter hack proxy for sure. Anyway, I still enjoyed reading the original 2 Purge issues. It's not Purge's fault that it's similar to Ebony Warrior. It's ANIA's fault. Let's be honest here. You can't drop a quote about Icon being Superman in blackface, as ANIA did, and then devote 50% of your line to cocoa-flavored Batmen that, aside from costumes, are largely indistinguishable from one another or their obvious subject of derivation. Static alone easily, overwhelmingly had more positive impact, cultural awareness, authorial clarity, and originality within the black community as well as beyond it than the entire ANIA line. Original Man was more like Original Man than creations that remained at ANIA, and Omega 7 had a more expansive and viable vision of a superhero universe than was offered by its brief publishing allies. It's further ironic that the one ANIA-associated publisher who criticized the Eric Larson trading cards was the only one who went to the trouble of creating an actual trading card. All the ANIA books had bound-in cards, which is to say annoying, stationary, anti-bookmarks that constantly try to make you lose your place and generally annoy you the entire time you're trying to read. Everybody knows that it's not a real trading card if you have to custom cut it, and these forgotten, decades-old, unwanted books I pulled out of a dollar bin will lose all their collectible value if you do that. There actually was an Ebony Warrior trading card put out as a promotional prototype for the ANIA set, but the non-sport market collapsed ahead of the comic speculation bust, so it never progressed from there.
But I gotta ask you, how difficult was it to put out these comic books you have? I mean, I grew up on Marvel and DC Comics, Thor, Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, and then yet we have this now. What's the circulation like on these comic books?
We have sold to date, and this is since last month, 130,000 of the first 2 titles. Mm-hmm. The figures for the next of Zwanna, Son of Zulu, and Ebony Warrior, the figures for Purge and Heru have not come in yet. Now, the significance of this, within 1 month in April, ANIA became the 16th largest publisher of comic books in the world. I'm not just talking in the U.S. We grabbed a 0.23 market share. Now, why did we do that? As you mentioned, there's nothing like this on the market. When it went out there, people snapped it up.
Where can one find this comic book? Is it right on in the newsstands where
you can find it in any comic specialty shop at this moment where they sell only comic books? Right now, we're going into newsstand distribution in about August. So you can look in the Yellow Pages or in any place where they sell only comic books, and you can find them. And there's also an African-American distributor in New York, D&J, that carries our books as well. You can find them if you can't find them anywhere. Now, last I checked, the books were sold out across the country. But that should not stop anybody from going in the store and say, hey, do you have the ANIA books? If not, why not? And order them, please.
Sounds good.
The November 1994 issue of Black Enterprise cover featured Milestone Media, but writer Carolyn M. Brown devoted a page to the new adventures of blacks in the comic book business, touching base with Only Studios, Mariah Graphics, and others, with the final paragraphs revolving around the ANIA drama. While Omega 7 was crowing about sales of 90,000 copies across their entire line in total, Heru's Roger Barnes spoke about ANIA's game plan as their public relations director. He was quoted as saying, "We wanted to wait until the industry bottomed out before progressing beyond their launch issues, which only sold around 40,000 copies each. While those were nice numbers by indie comic standards, it likely couldn't support a full-color line or entice further advertisers' dollars." Quietly, alongside a multitude of other post-boom publishers, ANIA dissipated.
Where do you see yourselves going from here?
Well, the way how I look at it is right now we're in pre-production of these characters, film, animation. We have gotten a lot of offers for these particular characters because this is a historic, groundbreaking moment. Never in the history of comic books have African Americans come together from different areas of the world, not to do battle with one another, but to come together, match resources, pool together the knowledge that we have each. Because I went to an African American college, and so did another author. We have another author that has a master's degree. Come together and achieve without asking for a handout.
Well, that sounds good.
Here's the thing. Again, I'm white, milky white, straight nose, and all three easily pronounced names with less than 3 syllables each white. I have strong reservations about releasing a critical post-mortem of an Afrocentric publishing initiative in general, but especially at this time of year during a white supremacist presidency, or at least an uncommonly overt one. I'm out of my lane, past the shoulder, through the guardrail, and maybe off the bridge into the ship channel on this thing. But here's another deal. Given that ANIA characterized Milestone as milquetoast knockoff sellouts, it's weird how much of ANIA's books played out like 70s and 80s superhero boilerplate, aside from a few Afrocentric references and some on-brand speechifying. Milestone was a legitimately pioneering creative endeavor that explored a broad spectrum of non-mainstream experiences, but especially black experiences from black creators. Despite ANIA's protestations, there are black Republicans like Icon was presented as being in his introduction, but that was also a launching pad to use other Milestone characters to question Icon's perspectives and choices. There isn't just one black experience, and Milestone reflected that, while ANIA as a group of black nationalists tried to present a single, artificial, sanitized African-American narrative. Worse, unlike Image, the creators didn't seem to compare notes so that their characters could be designed for distinction from one another. Hell, aside from Zwanna's extremes, he was a third Bruce Dwayne Wayne, and his Shazamming just as readily recalls Thor, and therefore Heru. Plus, these characters never interacted outside of 2 promotional images, so aside from the Keen Lion's Head ANIA logo, they were isolated islands. Tribe had more to do with Youngblood than Purge had to do with Heru, which was also via the same metric of just name-dropping. Wasn't Black Super Universe a selling point? Black superheroes matter at a time when powerful forces continue to affirm that, to them, black lives don't. Our culture would still benefit from Roger Barnes' attempts to teach African mythology and philosophy. Eric Griffin's Ebony Warrior deserves another chance to more fully articulate a black nationalist perspective to an audience more receptive than pimply-faced, polybagged junk bond traders. A Milestone revival has been promised for some time now, and a return to Dakota is an exciting proposition. But ANIA was right that it will always be compromised by the strings of Time Warner. Can they honestly and fully broach subjects like police brutality, intersectionality, mass for-profit incarceration, toxic masculinity, educational and career inequality, voter suppression? Becky with the good hair. ANIA pitted itself against Milestone and couldn't deliver. But it doesn't have to be an either-or situation. There's room for both, especially in the modern era of all digital publishing.
Well, I've been in the comic book industry as a publisher and writer for over 30 years. Purge was published in 1993. And what's great about Purge is that he is based in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And during the year of 93, he was also featured on the front page of the Winston-Salem Journal. And fortunately, he was also featured in this year's journal, basically celebrating his reemergence, the coming back of Purge. So I'm quite excited about what we have in store. Purge is going to come back more vibrant. We have a wonderful art team, and we're going to be talking about the Kickstarter campaign. But I wanted everyone to know about the history behind the character. It has been featured on USA Today, Newsweek, and Entertainment Tonight. So we're looking at a character that has a long legacy. For our Kickstarter campaign, we're raising $2,500 to cover the printing of Purge: A New Direction, Issue 1. And what's so exciting about this particular book is that we're going to be delving into Purge's past, about a man who's an entrepreneur, a technological expert, but a past that has been hidden from him for many, many years due to the fact that he was abducted and experimented on and left for dead. And years later, these powers emerged, and now he has to come to terms with. And what's great about this particular story is that he takes his powers and abilities and decides to use them to protect the city of New Salem, not only from outsiders, but from within, to make sure that the technology that is being created is kept in check. So you're going to find that this story is going to be a mixture of high-tech and African mythology.
Maybe Purge creator Roosevelt Pitt Jr. also noted the similarities between ANIA's offerings because he's continued to revisit and revise Purge over time. There was a one-off in 1996, and a few years ago, Pitt was crowdsourcing financing for a Purge graphic novel that emphasized science fiction elements and offered a new look for the titular hero that was more cinematic and less Chromium Age. Through his company Amara Entertainment, Pitt appears to have developed a massive library of diverse, imaginative, Afrocentric characters and is developing cartoons for a black heroic team that includes Purge. If you're interested in supporting diversity in comics today, or just curious to see what Pitt has come up with, visit his YouTube channel, the Purge Kickstarter featuring new art by Tribe's Larry Stroman, or the Amara website. I think you'll be glad you did.
Hi, I'm Roosevelt Pitt Jr., writer and creator of Purge Past Unspoken. Welcome to our Indiegogo campaign page. I have no doubt you will enjoy your stay, because we have some of the best perks ever and a stellar team bringing indie comics to a whole new level. We have Machindo Kumba of the Django fame, we have the legendary Larry Stroman of Tribe, and the Zong Brothers of India, and a host of other artists, such as Sanford Green, lending their artistic talents to our cause. But we need your help to bring a project 20 years in the making to reality. Purge's journey to reclaim a past that threatens to destroy him is just the beginning of a story of a hero's quest to protect the city of the future from being decimated from within. So take a look, and you will see what we do. A project filled with passion and excitement. So pledge, share, and purge on. And thanks for watching.
How does a man rid himself of doubt, of insecurity, of fear? It takes a resolve only few possess. A desire to change the world for the better, with an unwavering passion for the truth. Even if it means uncovering a past stained in blood. This is a story destined to redefine what it means to be a hero. Welcome to the unforeseeable future. Welcome to Purge, Past Unspoken.
The preceding podcast is a not-for-profit informational work. Any copyrighted materials contained are believed covered under fair use. No copyright infringement is intended. This has been a Rolled Spine podcast.